Hey, how are you, Sanjeev? Welcome. Maybe you want to do a quick intro. Tell us about your name, company you work for, sort of stuff you're working on at the moment.
Of course, yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Sanjeev. I'm the tech lead at Zinc. Zinc is an automated referencing and background checking service. And a lot of what we do is integrating across like HR stacks, so ATSs and like um, HRS softwares, and kind of working all together and kind of creating this one ecosystem. Um, I'm based off of Crouch End. I've come to the offices in Liverpool Street, and yeah, I think that's me.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about, your hometown, where you live, a little bit about, what's going on in London.
Yeah, I mean, London is London. So I live in Crouch End, which is this little, really quaint spot near Finsbury Park. So for people who are Arsenal fans, very close to the stadium. But I absolutely love the area I'm in because just because of the sheer number of coffee shops nearby. You can never be too far from a coffee shop. Actually, too close to a coffee shop.
Very cool. And what about Zinc? Tell me a little bit about more about sort of your team at Zinc and how you guys are structured as an engineering team, and maybe even anything else you want to share about the rest of the company.
Yeah, of course. So we started off quite recently, like I think like 2 or 3 years ago, and it was just the co-founders and myself. And then we've gone through this massive scaling period where probably at the start of this year, at January, we were probably 10 people. I think now we're inching towards 22, 21 maybe. And so we're doing massive hiring at the moment. And my tech team right now is just two other developers, but we have two more developers to join within the next month. So just doubling in size there, and then have more plans to hire more people as we go. The way we're structured at the moment is very flat. Obviously, we do have seniority and all that kind of stuff, but at the moment we're very flat, very fluid, able to kind of work on any issue that comes up, and it's worked out really well for a small team. And we have plans to introduce a three-person team structure as we go. And I think this was from one of the company advisors that we heard, where um, essentially we wanted three people team structures working on business OKRs instead of just working on the next product feature that comes along. And the idea with that was to effectively create the sense of ownership with the teams, because then you're focusing on driving business goals. And when something clicks for the business, it's very easy to kind of get involved and kind of get that satisfaction of seeing the outcome of the stuff we built.
That is very interesting. It's actually you're the second person that I've heard talk about structuring the engineering teams based on business goals rather than functions or features or things like that, which would maybe be a little bit more conventional way of building a team. That is super cool. So the why would there be three in each team? I'm just curious.
I think the idea was that each team would be a full stack team. So it wouldn't matter whether it was two front end developers or one back end or all three full stack developers. The idea was that you'd have one core unit that could work across the stack and work on any feature, any kind of issue anywhere. And the reason we kind of felt like three people was a good number was because as you scale, obviously when you're hiring new people, you can't really have new people start their own team because you need someone to help them on board and kind of get in tune with like how the company works. So it's very easy to go from three to four when a new person joins, split off into two, and then have another person join.
I
And it
see.
kind of creates a very organic way of growing so that everyone is involved and works with everyone.
I see. Because if you had two, then and one person left or something like that, then you'd be left with no pod. With that whole, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
I think
see.
that was the idea. Also, it does help, like being a really small team. Like you reduce like complexities with like this like knowledge sharing and working on different areas. And because you're so small, there's less friction on a lot of stuff, and it focuses on just like kind of speed and outcome.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I don't want to put you on the spot, but with this idea around business OKRs, can you think of an example, even if it's just conceptual, about how a business OKR would map to an engineering team?
Yeah, I mean it's
In this topic, to be honest with you, about it, because we're also working on how to scale our own engineering team. So it's a topic that I'm very interested
yeah,
in.
I'm happy to talk about it. I've been thinking about this for a while. But yeah, I think the core mentality is it's very as a developer or someone from an engineering team, it's very hard to kind of see how business OKRs can even reflect because as developers we're looking at code, we're looking at like, oh, let me build this feature out, and it's very hard to connect that with a business OKR. So say for instance at Zinc we do a variety of background checks. So we do criminal checks, identity checks, and education checks. And sometimes we and our core metric is turnaround times. So how long a check takes to kind of complete. So if our business OKR was to reduce the time of checks, the tech team in of itself would look at different variations of how to impact that number. So if it could be something as simple as looking at the number of tech support issues that come up and have this issue where a bit of information is incorrect just because of the user experience. That could be something you could involve yourself in. And the idea is you have a lot more impact on what gets built as well. So it's works very closely with product, I'd say. I think that's
Yeah,
the key defining factor. You need to have a lot of context on what's going on for the tech team to be able to kind of work on that kind of stuff.
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of your like sprints, do you do sort of, sprints in sort of a more agile or scrum based
Uh,
model, or how do
uh,
you structure your?
uh, we do a vaguely similar thing to Agile, but nothing established, nothing super stringent at the moment. Because one thing that I'm very cautious about is I think working in a tech team for two people, a tech team for three devs is drastically different to a tech team of four people, and it becomes more easy to manage as you scale in larger numbers. But in this early period, every new developer could drastically like what works for that team is drastically different. So at the moment, we're being very very fluid to the fact that if a new person comes and the system doesn't really work, we're very open to kind of critically looking at it and saying, let's change, let's see what works.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would definitely recommend checking out Basecamp's model of the sort of the 6 week iteration. So it's called, I think, Shape Up or something like that. And what they do is they have these sort of really interesting, instead of having, sprints are usually like either 2 weeks, some people even do 1 week, but it's usually like 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, things like that. They have these 6 week iterations where they focus much more on sort of a feature or something they're trying to release, and they sort of just allow the team to, sort of organically work on that together with product, with design, with all the resources that you need to do it, all working together to sort of whatever happens at the end of that 6 weeks, you're going to sort of release that product or feature, even if it's a slightly cut down version. It's a very, very cool thing. I would definitely check that out. It's an interesting way of doing things. It's different.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Actually, we do something vaguely similar, but like obviously not the same. So we aim to kind of any new feature that goes through planning. Whether that's a massive thing that impacts a lot of like a lot of our customers, we make sure to kind of look at it really critically and strip it down so that a feature takes at max 2 weeks. So even if that is half the feature as a V1, kind of get the bare minimum out there and then have a V2 right after. The idea is to constantly iterate through the product because as a business, like we're still like we have found a lot of customers love kind of giving feedback and we learn from that feedback and we make a lot of changes that work really well.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So sort of just taking a step back about Zinc itself as a product, what is Zinc, and how is it different or the same or similar to other products in the same domain, and sort of what makes it similar and what makes it different and what makes you passionate about it?
Yeah, I mean, of course. So I think there's a lot of context involved, I guess. So Zinc does referencing and background checking. So if anyone's like obviously at any job you run through this background checking process where you submit your details and you don't know what's going on with it, like you've never heard back and it's magically all ready by the time you start your job. But what we focus on is kind of giving a very good customer and candidate experience and also trying to reduce that number. So turnaround times for checks itself is like drastically low. So we do like criminal checks or like identity checks really fast because we integrate with whichever system works best for us. And as a product, we make sure that candidates as well as customers can get a really good experience. And especially for candidates, we do this thing which I'm really proud of is we have something called reusable references. So because of the number of customers we have, when a candidate runs through references for the first time, and in fintech or any regulated industry, you do a massive number of years of referencing. Say you do 5 years of referencing. You've got to go back 5 years back, find your old manager to give you a reference. And the next company you go, which might be in another year, you're going to have to go contact that manager all over again. So what we do is actually we save those references, and since we verified it once, when you go to a new job and they also run their referencing through Zinc, we have those references ready to go, and that's an instant win for both the customer and the candidate because you don't have to go back and talk to an old manager from 4 years ago, and customers get back references within like seconds rather than days. And I think that just has a compound effect, and this makes for a really good experience all around.
Okay, very cool. So, like with background checks, you've got the ID checks and stuff like that, which is like, driver's license and passport and things like that. But it sounds like you guys do more than that, and you're also doing the actual reference checks. So that sounds like someone would actually have to phone. There's some sort of actual human element. Is that how it works, or it's automated?
It's automated from the point of the customer and the candidate. So the candidate would give us the information of the referee, and then we would go off and try to contact this person. So we start off with emails, and if we have a phone number, we send text messages. And the idea is to and in some scenarios, if we need, like, say, a regulatory reference, we'd contact the company itself, the HR department. And our idea is to kind of keep referencing down to like getting a response within 1 to 2 days, which is a lot harder when you think about the number of people involved over like a large period of references.
Yeah. Okay. I've always been fascinated by that because, we obviously also do that at UpStack in terms of, background checks and things like that. And I also get phoned sometimes by people, and it's not always the best experience and things like that. It seems to be like very chaotic sort of space. So how do you guys try and differentiate yourself, in the market in terms of, where you sit and how you're different than others out there with that human?
I think it's massively to do with just the digital experience. Even if it's like, say, a call or a text message, we send over this really smooth link with no logins required, just for you to look at a question that you need to verify, and just all the details people can say, hey, did you know this person? Have they worked with you? And there's a click of a button, and you're done with your reference. And you always have the option to answer questions about that person, like a more detailed reference. But the idea is to kind of make that UI and make that entire workflow really smooth. So even if you're a referee or a company answering a reference, it's just really simple and really easy for you to just finish.
Well, I don't think I've ever seen a digital, like I've had phone calls for people who want, and sometimes you're never sure whether or not it's a scam call or if it's a real call, but I've never really seen an SMS or some sort of link that I could click, or an email that I could click to actually just get it over and done with there and then, and just say, look, I know this person, I don't know this person. I actually get called. So there's actually another company called UpStack as well, and I actually get incorrect reference calls. So it's like, so sometimes I just want to be able to click a button and just sort of for them to leave me alone and say, look, I don't know this person, or they didn't work here, or they're from a different company or something. So an SMS or an email sounds really cool.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's working for us really well. That like we're trying to modernize this old way of doing stuff and kind of get everything digital. So even if to a point where you jump on a reference, you're not really sure what's going on, and you need help, we have like a brilliant customer support team that I think they're averaging something like some insane numbers these days. I think it was 96% satisfaction rate and like less than 3 minutes response times. Like, I don't know how they do it, but we always have support on help, and it just kind of gives a really good experience for whoever's using the platform.
Very cool. Excellent. So maybe tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, I know that you sort of have moved from, being a sort of individual contributor to a team as an engineer, and then you've sort of moved up to be into more of a lead position. Do you want to maybe share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of
that
course.
journey?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's been a massive roller coaster. I worked with Zinc through my university. Been working with them for quite a long while now, And as an individual contributor, I always loved just kind of getting my hands dirty and working on new features, driving impact, like driving outcomes, and kind of getting a lot of impact right out of the start. And that's something I was really happy doing. And I think when you work in a really small startup, the key defining factor is just that kind of core individual contributions. And over time, kind of working with the business and kind of aligning yourself with those business goals kind of makes you focus on the bigger picture. And that was a natural change for me to kind of start leading the team where, I had an eye out on what works for the business, what do we need to succeed. And being an individual contributor before helps me translate that to the team in a way that works for engineers to say, hey, we hit this is what we need to do, and this is how we can impact those big numbers. And over time, it was a very difficult change. Don't get me wrong. I think individual contribution and management are whole different ball games, and there's a lot to learn. And you need to have a constant, you need to be constantly learning. And I think that mentality helps massively. But it's something that came quite naturally as part of Zinc because I've been involved from the get go, and it was just a natural next move.
Yeah. So I've met different sorts of developers. Some developers want to become engineering managers. Some want to stay as contributors in the team, and don't necessarily want to move into a more management position. What would you say to a developer who was thinking of deciding? Do they want to get more into management, or do they want to continue to be another contributor in the team?
I think with this, it is a fairly fresh question for myself as well. But I think what's the most important thing to consider is what the role itself is. As an individual contributor, you're focusing on hands-on development. You're focusing on contributions you make yourself, and the amount of impact you have is dependent on yourself. And that's a very easy thing to change and kind of make improvements on. But as an engineering manager, what really matters is not your efficiency, but efficiency of your team. So it's not just about working with what works for you. It's about looking at a bigger team as a whole. And I think for any new engineering manager or tech lead or anything that's going down that management route, I think considering that aspect and considering whether that works for you, is that something that you'd enjoy doing? And ultimately, I'm a massive believer of doing things that you like doing. So being able to kind of just foresee what the role itself is and how you'd be good at the role is a key defining factor before you make that decision.
Yeah, when it comes to your vision of the engineering team, are you looking at having everyone in one office? Are you looking for fully remote? Are you looking for hybrid? What's your vision, especially as you start to scale the team?
So at the moment, we come we work in a hybrid setup. So we come in twice a week into our London office, and I think people who live outside London come in once a week. And I think our idea moving forward is definitely a preference for hybrid. I don't think we'd go fully back in the office anytime soon. And our preference is massively to hybrid because we've seen that just that in-person communication is just invaluable. And it's not even in terms of productivity or efficiency, because I think it's just that day-to-day, like having that one day in a week where you have meetings that you would otherwise spread across the week to kind of have that personal impact with everyone else and kind of have those conversations kind of just helps create a really good culture within the business. So I think for us, we're set up hybrid, and we're probably going to focus on hybrid. I think remote is something we have considered, we have done during COVID, but our preference at the moment is massively towards hybrid because we enjoy meeting everyone. We enjoy kind of putting a face behind the screen and kind of actually interacting with them.
Yeah, so it'd be like a model where people could come into your office on at least X number of days per week or whatever, so they'd need to be within a traveling distance of your HQ sort of thing.
I guess so. We have people who live up in Essex. I think we have a couple who live down in Croydon. Like they come in once a week. And I mean, I wouldn't say we have a preference, or at least we haven't gotten a point where, we have someone outside a certain radius. But I guess, yeah, I mean, I think it's just like a number of days. We want to meet everyone we work with. We really love the culture we've built at the moment. So we do this thing every day. at 3:30, we do something called the tea break. So we all kind of jump together on a massive call, and the idea itself is we just get on a call and play an online game. So we do like Scribble or Pictionary or Monopoly Bid or Monopoly Deal. We play a game for half an hour where it's anything apart from work, where we just play games with everyone else and kind of get to know them. And I think that's something that's really fun to do. It just kind of bonds everybody.
Wow, that's amazing. So what would you do if you found a developer who was phenomenal and you really got on really well and they lived on the other side of the world?
I'm not sure. That's a tricky question. I mean, talent, you find talent everywhere. And obviously, phenomenal developers are rare, and finding someone amazing will definitely work. I think it would come down massively to how well we could work with that person. I mean, I'm a massive, I'm a believer of that you could be brilliant, but if you couldn't work with the team, like working with the team, working with other people helping other people and kind of working on a shared goal is something that's critical for businesses these days. And I think that would be the deciding factor more than location. So I would be like, how would they work with the team? I think that would be my most important checkbox they need to hit.
Yeah, no, it's just a topic I've been thinking a lot about, and I think a lot of companies will probably have to think more about, where obviously COVID forced everyone to be remote, at least for a period of time. And then there's different levels of comfort that companies have in terms of how far a radius they want to go away from their office in terms of hiring. And so I'm always interested to understand. And I think that I'm curious to understand, or even just talk about, even if it's just conceptual, is, if you did find a developer that was fantastic on the other side of the world and they were integrating with the team digitally, or they were integrating with the team but they would still be missing out on that ability to take the train from Essex to the HQ once a week. They'd still be missing out on that aspect, and they might feel left out if you decided to go for, if that was important. There's not like one way is right or wrong, but they would definitely be missing out on that, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of stuff you do miss out. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. I think remote working definitely works, and I think the deciding factor there is the small acts, like like a tea break or in the middle of a day. So you actually you kind of get to know the other person apart from their working style. So you kind of build a bond separate to that. So I think for us, if we did have someone remote, I think we have enough stuff in place to kind of get to know a person that I think it would work. And I think that's something that businesses need to focus on, just that culture is just massively important when working within a business.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were adding a couple more people to the engineering team. So from those two new people, or just in general, when you're hiring and looking for a new team member, what are the main sorts of things that you're looking for when you're looking for a great engineer?
So so some of my team, I think, I wouldn't say I watched I heard this podcast. One of my team members spoke to me about this podcast. I can't remember the name, but it categorized engineers as either figure it outers or scale it uppers. And I think that's something it works really well in a big company where you can have a massive variation of everything. But as a small business, as a startup, and as a scale up, I think what's really important is the figure it outers. Someone who is willing to kind of go in and build something and be really open about failing fast and just kind of getting their hands dirty and kind of building code and getting features out there. So for us, as we're hiring new developers, this is something we're really kind of looking for as we're really small. We're still really small, and the next few developers are going to be really critical for how we impact business goals in this year. So right now, we're focused on great devs that we'd love to work with, who are not afraid of kind of getting their hands dirty and working on really cool stuff. And because of, even though we do have a stream hierarchy and structure, we are really flat. Like, we have a very flat hierarchy, so to a point that anyone can ask questions, anyone can lead a feature, anyone can suggest improvements, and we're always very collaborative, and we always kind of just talk out and kind of get a lot of ideas from the rest of the team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As an engineer and me personally, I've also spoken to dozens or hundreds of engineers, the number one thing I've noticed is that there's a sort of a satisfaction or a sort of a feeling that happens when an engineer releases a new product and gets something out to market. Like, I feel that there's something more important than money or whatever the salary is or things like that. Obviously, salary is part of life, but I feel like the thing that really drives an engineer is also that satisfaction of releasing a new product and getting it out to market and getting it into the hands of users, and that that a user is going to appreciate something. I always like to say, like, if somebody offered you, I don't know, more money, okay, of course, obviously, if someone offered you 10 times the amount of money, you'd probably do something, an engineer might do something in order just to make money for a year or two. But ultimately, you want to release a product that's going to be appreciated by people. And there is definitely that moment. I've had a bunch of moments in my life where I've released a product and I know that people are enjoying it, and you can see from the metrics, or you can see from feedback from users, that it's being used and being appreciated and being loved by the end user. Can you think of times in your career or with Zinc or with previous things, or even a side project or an open source project or anything that you've done where you had that moment where you felt like, wow, this is amazing. Like, it's just something that I built and that I built myself or involved in building, and now is really getting traction or being built, and you had that real moment of satisfaction of releasing that product or feature?
Um, yeah, of course. I think it would mostly be with Zinc. The first thing that comes to mind is this feature or this integration we built with this external software called HiBob. So I don't know if you know what HiBob is. It's effectively a HRS system. So it's where companies handle all employee data, like I-9 forms or P60s, and kind of keeps track of all their bank details and all that kind of information about an employee, like for compliance or whatever. And we found that companies that were using us as a platform used to manually download a PDF report and then upload it into the separate bit of software just to kind of keep it for their own record keeping. And for us, we were looking at this and we just kind of went, we integrate with the top of the funnel where we start checks from like an applicant tracking system, but we'd never considered kind of uploading the finalized reports to this HRS software. And so we tried it out with this company called HiBob, which is massive in this industry. And we kind of built this integration where we would automatically update reports as soon as the checks were done. So which meant that for the entirety of someone within the talent team, they would start the checks off in one system and then completely forget about it, because the checks would be updated into HiBob automatically. Results would be in there. The details of the report would be there. The PDF would be in there. And I think when we released it, it was such a massive kind of response we got from the whole community as a whole, that there was like, oh, we love this. This is absolutely amazing. And we saw that with just like sheer number of not even within customers itself, like more like we got so many new leads of like businesses saying this is our deciding factor. Like, wow, this is such a cool feature. And I think building that out and kind of just looking and saying, or being part of that decision, say, we should try this, and kind of seeing the result out of that is just something that's just a different feeling.
Love it. Love it. That is great. So what about any other stories that you might want to share about, building products, or anything sort of fun stories, or anything else you want to share about building products?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, you work on a whole range of stuff as a developer across your career, personally, outside of work, in other companies. You work on a lot of cool stuff. One thing that I built that I felt was like very wasted because I didn't really take advantage of it was during my university. I built this bit of software with an Amazon Alexa, and this was pre-COVID, back in like 2017 or something along those lines. And the idea was I'd use an Alexa, built like an Amazon skill to take orders and connected it to a POS system. And it was meant to be as like a cool project I'd work on as part of a hackathon or something. And then now thinking about it, I completely forgot about the idea. And the idea was you would talk to an Amazon Alexa, it would take your order, and it would just go off into a POS system. No contact, no waiting for waiters. And that was pre-COVID. And I realized during COVID that, oh my God, this would have been an amazing idea. I just never did anything with it. So that's like one of my biggest regrets.
So let's continue over to tools and processes. It's something that I'm like super interested in and passionate about. And I think, all people involved in engineering product is the tools and processes and stuff that you use in order to get stuff done. I know that tools are always changing. And, I always think about, I remember when I first started engineering, Skype was the thing that everyone was using and it was so revolutionary. And then suddenly, different tools came along and then Slack came along and different things like that. So what are the tools that you like to use? And maybe a couple of those that you couldn't even imagine living without?
Yeah, of course. I think for me, it's mostly been, I think there's this tool called Code Climate. Effectively, what it does is it plugs into your CI build, and it runs code analysis on your code itself. So it looks at code coverage, it looks at code quality, and it allows for like very customizable configurations. So you could effectively take your engineering style guidelines and implement it on Code Climate, and it makes sure that the stuff that you build is very consistent. Instead of having people looking through PRs, trying to find edge cases or stuff that isn't fitting a guideline, this thing completely runs everything, puts comments in the code telling you, puts comments in the PR saying this thing is not up to scratch. I think that's something that just really helps the whole PR process and something that just works really well.
That is cool. I need to check out Code Climate. I haven't heard of that before. I'm definitely going to check that out. What about other tools like that you sort of use in your, engineering team?
I think honestly, the biggest thing that I think once we plugged in, we couldn't believe that we're like, why haven't we been using it? Is actually just been Notion. It's been more that just having that singular source of all information related to the tech team or like the entire business, just having that openness and that communication across the whole team. And I think the way we've used it mostly has just been like looking at someone who's being onboarded and then kind of saying, hey, why don't we just start writing onboarding docs, look through stuff that you're running through. And then if something doesn't make sense, or something that you'd like to add a little bit more, we went, this extra bit of information here would have helped. And just going in and adding that and having the onboarding docs effectively being part of the onboarding to kind of update the onboarding docs just makes that whole process really smooth. And just having Notion there as a single source of truth has just like made our life a lot easier when it comes to onboarding.
We had a similar experience. We only started using Notion, I would say maybe 3 to 6 months ago, and has been phenomenal for us as well. And that's just what's so weird is that there's been tools like Confluence and things like that for years. There's been plenty of tools that you could use for there's been Google Docs, there's been like plenty of documentation tools, but for some reason a new tool comes along like Notion, and it is just such a breath of fresh air. And finally, we can actually find everything from design assets to style guides to onboarding processes, and you can even do to-do lists and things like that. But even regardless of that, just having it, it has been an amazing game changer for us as well. It's amazing how Notion has, that's a great example of a product that does the same thing as so many other things that came before it, but just does it faster, easier, simpler. There's just something about it. Can you even think about what that thing, I don't even know. I've been thinking about what is it, the thing that makes that so much better than using Confluence? I have a couple of ideas, but I'd like to hear your ideas about why you think maybe something like that would be.
I think it genuinely comes down to UX. I think if you have an amazing experience to do something, because it's always about barriers to do anything. So say, even if I wanted to go outside and grab a drink from an off license or a shop, me going down, getting it, traveling to that place, buying it, even like using my card, all these are barriers to entry. And obviously I'm simplifying it to a day-to-day interaction. But I think that's where, these products like Getter or Wheezy came in, where they kind of simplified everything and just go on your phone, tap a button, and we'll be at your door. I think it's the same aspect with like Notion, where just the stuff that you needed to do, even with like, say, Google Docs, where you needed to search something or look at all the documents. Notion just makes it so simple and just looks at what does a user really want to do, and then kind of just simplifies it to a point where it's just really obvious interaction. And I think that is the key factor for all these kind of products. It's just looking at what does a user really want to do, and then kind of make that so simplistic that it's just right there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's what I feel like. I mean, I remember using Confluence in different companies that I've been involved with in the past, and it's quite involved in terms of having a login and getting access, and you have to sort of click an edit button, and it does look good in the end, but there's a lot of barriers to entry. And then with Notion, it looks like there's something about the attention to detail that they've given to the fonts, the typeset or whatever, and it just looks good and it feels good and it feels like something special. It feels like you've created a document that's a special document that you can keep as part of your team's assets, but also easy enough for people to update and to comment and to interact with and things like that. So, and also I think a huge factor is speed. I think the reason that tools like Notion and Slack, I think, got a lot of adoption is they're fast, and it's very subtle. But when you get a feeling, when there's a delay on a page, you can sometimes get turned off, where you feel like, wait a minute, maybe I don't trust this. Did it really update? Maybe my updates just got lost. You don't get that with Notion. Yeah. It just sort of works.
I think all of that kind of boils down to just UX as well. It's just like feedback on something you do. Like even if it's a button and a click and a little toast notification, that small feedback just gives users delight. And I think capitalizing on user delight and kind of giving those small interactions that just make them have a good experience is what changes everything.
Absolutely. So let's go back to sort of, your life and, what you find fun and things like that, and life in London, and work-life balance. But, what do you do for fun, or how do you unwind? How do you, maintain, mental health and things like that? Obviously it could be related to London.
So I'm a massive fan of going out. I go out I wouldn't say most days a week, but I go out quite often in a week. And, it can be anything from going to the pub, or I think for me, I love playing games. I mean, mostly bar games, but I love playing games. Like in London, we have a bunch of really cool places like Flight Club or Electric Shuffle, or just going down bowling, playing pool. I just love doing that kind of stuff. So for me, through the week, I'll go to like the Rowan's, which is like really, really iconic to Crouch End in Finsbury Park. It's like this massive bowling place. And just go play a game of bowling on a Saturday, or like middle of the week on a Wednesday, just to go play some pool with your flatmate. I think that's just makes it really relaxing. And it also doesn't seem like you're always working and you need a break. You just kind of go off and then kind of let off a bit of steam and just have some fun. I think for me, I think that's been the defining thing with being in London, just everything being so close by. So even if you get bored of one thing, there's something else just around the corner.
Very cool. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for connecting. It was an absolute pleasure. I love having conversations like this where I have a list of, several things that I need to go off and research. Definitely interested to check out a few of the things that you mentioned. I learned a lot, so I appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Of course, it's been amazing talking to you. I think I need to also check up some of the team structuring stuff you mentioned. So plenty of stuff for me to go off and look at.
All right, awesome. Great chatting.